Hello and welcome to India's World. India has voiced concern over reports that the US is considering a nuclear agreement with Pakistan on the lines of the India-US civilian nuclear cooperation deal. The outlines of a potential nuclear agreement between US and Pakistan were revealed in an article in the Washington Post last week. The article claimed the White House is exploring what could be a diplomatic blockbuster, possible new limits and controls on Pakistan's nuclear weapons and delivery systems. Such an accord might eventually open a path towards a Pakistani version of the civil nuclear deal that was launched with India in 2005. The article also suggested that under the agreement, Pakistan might be asked to restrict its nuclear program to weapons and delivery systems that are appropriate to its actual defense needs against Indian nuclear threat. In return, the US might support a waiver for Pakistan for sourcing nuclear technology for civilian uses such as power generation. Ever since India and the US signed a civilian nuclear cooperation agreement, the Pakistanis have sought a similar deal for themselves, and now they seem to be getting one. To discuss the proposed US-Pak civilian nuclear agreement, we have with us three distinguished experts. We have with us Ambassador Arundhati Ghose, an eminent diplomat. She was India's ambassador to Korea, Egypt, UNESCO, as well as ambassador and permanent representative of India to the UN offices in Geneva and the Conference on Disarmament. An expert on nuclear issues, Ambassador G. Parthasarthy, another eminent diplomat. He was India's ambassador to Myanmar, High Commissioner to Cyprus, Australia, and of course to Pakistan. Professor Chintamani Mahapatra, he's a professor who teaches at the Center for Canadian, American and Latin American Studies at the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, an expert on America. I welcome you all to this discussion. Let me begin with you, Professor Mahapatra. What could be the likely contours of the proposed civilian nuclear agreement between US and Pakistan, if indeed it takes place?
First of all, I would like to say that there is no official statement or official report on this issue yet. Number
There's
two,
no official denial either.
that's true, but there is no statement. There is no official statement by the US government, either the State Department or the White House on this. Number two, this is just a report which came in Washington Post. We all assume that this is a leaked report, or maybe this is a kind of trial balloon that has been published as a report in Washington Post, and now they want to know how the Chinese, how the Indians, how the rest of the world going to react to this. And in fact, our MEA spokesperson has already reacted to it. I personally would have liked if there would not have been any official reaction from Government of India yet, and the reaction would have been in Rajya Sabha TV or some other TV channels.
Well, we are not a government channel, first of all, so there's no question of government
that is
reaction
why I'm saying.
But my question to you was...
That is why I'm saying that instead of official reaction, a television discussion would have been better.
Okay, so we are having this discussion. My question to you was, what could be the possible contours of the deal?
Right. Contours of the deal, this is totally speculative. I would rather say why such a report came right now, and what could be the reasons why the US...
That is not what we are discussing. So let me move on to Ambassador Parthasarthy. What could have prompted the US administration to consider such a deal with Pakistan, considering that till recently America itself was flagging the concern that Pakistani bombs could fall into the hands of Islamic radicals?
Well, I think this is based on the American assessment that mere sops to Pakistan will change its behavior. They tried it in Afghanistan and thinking the Pakistanis would behave with the Taliban. They have not. And they will go wrong here also. Because the talk has been of a deal on similar circumstances as India. But India was given the deal because it had an impeccable non-proliferation record. In the case of Pakistan, that is not the case. Immediately after 9/11, two leading Pakistani scientists, Sultan Bashruddin Mahmud and Chaudhry Abdul Majid, were arrested on information from the Americans that they were liaising with Al-Qaeda to provide it with nuclear and biological weapons. Two other scientists had to flee to Myanmar because there was a White House fact sheet out on them. And one knows of the A.Q. Khan episode with Libya, North Korea, and Iran. So the basis, therefore, as one can see it, it cannot be non-proliferation, because it would be very naive to think that that behavior is going to change given Pakistan's ambitions, more so in the Islamic world, that will change. So I get the feeling that we'll have to wait and see how this plays out, because their expectations on Afghanistan have failed. And the US Congress will look at this very, very carefully. And to that extent, I am glad we have made our first move at this stage. But the sort of information we have of their proliferation track record, as I said, with their scientists, apart from A.Q. Khan, their proliferation with North Korea, which involved transfer of enrichment technology for missiles, I think where General Karamat was involved, that speaks for itself.
Ambassador Ghosh, what do you think is that the US wants from Pakistan in return for this kind of concession?
Well, I'd say, if I can recall, 4 reasons why they would be considering such a thing, apart from the pressure coming from the non-proliferation lobby in Washington, which is quite strong in the Obama administration. Yeah. One is the Americans feel that they have lost leverage with Pakistan, and Pakistan is, after all, a very large country with nuclear weapons, and in the region, the USPak region and Central Asia, it is important because the United States is looking at China. So they need, and China is very active currently in things. So the leverage, this would give them some kind of leverage.
Okay, that's reason number 1.
Number 1. Number 2, Pakistan recently came out with a slight modification of their nuclear doctrine, where they are talking about not credible minimum deterrence, but something which doesn't make any sense. Full spectrum deterrence based on credible minimum deterrence. The based on makes no sense. But full spectrum means tactical nuclear weapons as well, that is battlefield. The third is actual arsenal and the building of plutonium. Yeah. Is increasing in Pakistan from all reports. But most worrying to the Americans has been the recent development of their Pakistani missile. I think it's the Shaheen 4, where the range is 1,200 kilometers. And they've said, oh, that's because India's got something in Andamans and so forth, which is rubbish. But they are worried about the Middle East. Okay. Is this meant for the Middle East? So that is 3. And the 4th one, if I can get my thoughts in order, is that I don't know what the Americans are looking for. It could be 2. One is something which is like, but not exactly the same as the India civil deal, because the conditions they seem to have put forward are deal directly with the Pakistani military arsenal. They never put those conditions on us. Yeah. And that is, I think, again to do with China. Okay. China is supplying the Pakistanis with new reactors, unfortunately, of very old vintage, 1970s, not updated technologies. Yeah. There could be accidents. Yeah. One is near Karachi. So, you know, that kind of fear. Okay. So they, I think, would like China to abide by the nuclear suppliers group rules, which these are not. So I think there is a kind of 4 different reasons why they are testing this out, and maybe what Chintamani said. Yeah. It's just a trial balloon.
Okay. Okay. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're discussing a possible civilian nuclear agreement between the United States and Pakistan. Master Parthasarthy, when Iran tried to go nuclear or was alleged to be going nuclear, the US imposed drastic sanctions on it. But Pakistan, which according to US reports is actually increased the production of nuclear weapons, is expanding its nuclear arsenal, is being rewarded. So do you find the US using double standards? You know, one set of rules for Iran, another one for Pakistan.
I think the basic fact is it would be rationalized this way. that the US under no circumstances can allow a country which has signed the non-proliferation treaty to digress from it. Pakistan is not a signatory to the non-proliferation treaty, whereas Iran was, and therefore Iran was dealt with, apart from the fact of the US vendetta against Iran. But I think I come back to a more important factor, which is the Chinese role. As an American said, there is no such thing as a Pakistani nuclear arsenal. There is a Chinese nuclear arsenal in Pakistan. The Pakistani weapons are of Chinese designs. In fact, the designs which were handed over by A.Q. Khan to Libya, the instruction manuals were in Chinese of a 1967 Chinese weapon. So I think the China factor cannot be ignored by the United States. More important, and which to me is more worrying, in Afghanistan, the US is colluding with China against our interests. Will the US take that path on this also? I would think not, because this is much more sensitive. But the fact is, you cannot ignore what they have done in dealing with Pakistani facilitation, with the Taliban, which continuously kills Indians. And will this be, so that is the geopolitical factor. But the larger factor is, if they go ahead with this deal, unless they can reconcile it with some control on this Pakistani propensity to proliferate, unless they can control it with something from their ambitions to have 400 nuclear weapons, which would then become a loose cannon which could go anywhere, that would be a larger US interest in doing it. And I don't think we should look at it mainly in India-specific terms, because the Pakistanis have nuclear ambitions, as Arundhati Ghose said, extending westwards into the Gulf.
Okay, so let me take this to you, Professor Mahapatra. Is not the primary attempt of the United States to limit Pakistani nuclear deterrent to a strategic deterrent vis-a-vis India, rather than have a free spectrum deterrence, which means they keep on expanding their missile ranges and so on and so forth. Now, if that is the case, does it mean that the US thinks that Indian nuclear arsenal is developed only vis-a-vis a Pakistani threat, that they don't see a Chinese threat to India?
They know very well that the Pakistani weapons are targeted only against India. About India, the case is totally different.
Pakistan has declared that publicly. It is India-centric.
Yeah. So I would rather say, I see it from a different angle, that Obama has only 1.5 years to go, and he has made a deal with Iran. He is making a different kind of deal with Cuba. Now with Pakistan, I'm sure it's going to be North Korea. All the countries which are very close to China, and the US is losing its leverage. They are trying to reward that country with something that Pakistan has been demanding for such a long time, particularly since 2008 when India got a deal. Now, by taking advantage of this offer, they want to restrict the Pakistani nuclear arsenal and have a little more leverage, rather than allow China to do whatever it wants with Pakistan. So that is the main goal of the United States.
Ambassador Ghosh, there have also been American strategic thinkers who have been arguing for making Pakistan a normal nuclear state.
Normal state.
Sorry, normal state.
Not necessarily nuclear.
No. There are thinkers which say that limit its nuclear arsenal, make it a normal nuclear state, bring it into a halfway house into the nuclear non-proliferation regime. Are some of these thinkers, do they have a negative feeling towards India, and do they feel that actually it's India which has led to the nuclearization of South Asia, and that India has created this problem, and therefore Pakistan needs to be helped to tackle it?
I think this may have been there in early days, and most of these so-called strategic thinkers, these specific ones, are and were totally against the India-US nuclear agreement and the NSG waiver of 2008. I think, but over the years, they have come to accept India's two-front problem, the China and Pakistan problem, because of the development of our missile programs. So I think there is a slight shift I don't want to think, that they are anti-Indian, but certainly they feel that, I think they're more frightened of Pakistan because it is unstable, because it is got these terrorists rushing around all over the place. There have been major natural calamities, earthquakes and floods, which they've been unable to cope.
Yeah.
So what would happen? And the Chinese thing is got them even more frightened. So they think, as Partha said, you give them a sop because they feel that Pakistan wants it not for economic reasons but for status reasons. They want parity with India on the nuclear side.
Okay.
Give it to them, but the conditions are really those which not even Iran would accept, and Iran is accepted a lot. So I think it is, at least from what seems to be coming out, sign the FMCT, sign the CT, I mean, don't stop the FMCT, sign the CTBT, restrict your arsenal, behave properly, even control your terrorists.
Yeah.
What?
So, quickly,
So you
because we're running
can't-
out of time
So
on this
I'm
segment.
sorry, the issue is, it is something which the Pakistanis have been worried about. When the Iran-US nuclear agreement, or whatever, P5, got finished, the commentary in the Pakistani media was now they will turn to our arsenal.
Okay, all right. So we need to take a break. I'll come back to you, Partha. We need to take a break at this moment. We'll be back again with you in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're discussing a possible US-Pakistan civilian nuclear agreement. Professor Mahapatra, if whatever Ambassador Ghose has said and Ambassador Parthasarthy has said is correct, that this is to limit Pakistan's nuclear arsenal, then why is India concerned about the possibility of this deal?
In my personal view, India should not be concerned. I would welcome a civil nuclear deal between US and Pakistan because I would like more American leverage over Pakistani nuclear program of any kind than the Chinese one.
Yeah.
I would say, yes, I would like him, I would welcome it, but experience has shown, starting with the way they are dealing with Afghanistan, that they lose leverage. The Pakistanis know how to play the Americans beautifully.
Okay.
And
but do we know, Ambassador Ghose, how to play the Americans? What would be the impact of a US-Pak civilian agreement on India-US strategic partnership?
I don't think we would have made this statement without first talking to the Americans through back channels.
Yeah.
We're close enough at governmental level for us to have already exchanged views that we are going to go public.
Yeah, but so you're saying it will have no impact at all on the India-US strategic partnership?
The US administration now has, India is going to get really upset. There's our market there. So leverage versus market.
Okay.
It's a debate which is ongoing in the State Department clearly.
So, Ambassador Parthasarthy, suppose this nuclear deal happens with Pakistan. Pakistan becomes a strategic partner of the Americans because it would require that kind of...
It's an
it is, but
MNNA.
now it would become even a deeper relationship. How difficult or easy would it be for India to trust American intentions in South Asia, in Asia Pacific, in the Indian Ocean, and all the kind of joint statements that strategic visions that we have announced with America?
you see, I've been long enough in this business not to get too overexcited about any one relationship. We have to maintain our strategic autonomy to act independently. That does not preclude a good relationship with America, but it has under no circumstances to be an exclusive dependence on America. And I'm quite certain the way we are going about our diplomacy, we are playing those cards regionally and internationally. You cannot afford to be exclusively or overly dependent on any one power for a country of our size. Strategic autonomy has to be maintained, and I'm sure we'll do it.
Professor Mahapatra, Ambassador Ghose said that Indians would have discussed with the Americans before making this statement. The question is, did the Americans discuss with India before negotiating with Pakistan a possibility of a civilian nuclear deal? Why did they have to float a test balloon through Washington Post? Why couldn't they pick up the phone and Bharat talk to his friend Narendra in India and discuss it. Why should we be taken by surprise? So my question to you is that do you agree with them that it will have no impact on the strategic relationship that we have with America?
I didn't quite say that.
I'll have 2 points to make here. Number 1 point is this. Even the administration which offered a civil nuclear deal to India, what did they do? Colin Powell came to India, said nothing about declaring Pakistan as a major non-NATO ally, goes to Islamabad, and just next day he announces. And we're very offended about it in a way. Now, in this particular case, I think it would have been better if the MEA would have spoken to them. If they have done it and then reacted, I understand. But there is no report about it. So we should have waited for some more time. And if there is a parallel dialogue between India and the US on Pakistan thing, I think it should be a positive thing for India, because Pakistan has to give up something to get a deal like this. And that may be good for stability in the region.
You wanted to say something?
No, I think he has a point. So I'm not willing to pass a final judgment till I see the contours. If Pakistan is willing for an early conclusion and abiding by the FMCT and placing all its installations under safeguards so that we ensure they are abiding by...
not military.
No, facing their these things under safeguards to ensure that they are not violating the FMCT. I have fine, but Pakistan as an acceding to the FMCT, to my mind, is very important. We should be, and it can't just be in isolation.
Okay, so Ambassador Ghose, your intervention suggests that the deal would be similar to India's, that Pakistan's nuclear program
it will
would be
not
divided into civilian and military
necessarily.
program. Civilian program will come under IAEA safeguards.
The word used by Fitzpatrick, because I wrote something against his normalization book. He responded to that by saying, I did not say like the India-US, akin to.
Okay.
Now, the division between civilian and nuclear is bound to come up.
Civilian and military.
Civilian and military is bound to come up. But I do want to say that there is no FMCT. Pakistan has held up the FMCT.
That's what I'm saying. We should force them into it.
So whatever the issue, I think we value our relations with the Americans. They are giving us quite a lot of intelligence. And it doesn't have to be at the level of Barack and whatever he calls the PM. It could be at the level of Jaishankar, who has come from Washington.
Okay.
So I think, we don't, because they are not briefing us, we don't have to think that they're really stupid.
Okay, so they're not stupid, but what does it do to Prime Minister Modi and his putting all his eggs in the American basket?
I wouldn't say that he's putting all his eggs in the American basket. Merkel is quite independent of the Americans. Let's see what happens when Modi visits Moscow later this year. And we were even keeping a line of communications with the Chinese Open on the BRICS Bank and so on and so forth. So I think as long as we... what I say is keep strategic autonomy.
Absolutely.
Don't let the Americans believe they can take us for granted.
Okay, good. On that note, we've run out of time. I'd like to thank Professor Chintamani Mahapatra, Ambassador Parthasarthy, Ambassador Arundhati Ghose for participating in this discussion. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week as usual. Till then, goodbye. And thanks for watching India's World.